Hello, Bobby Torres of Frightbox Recording here. Now, after 19 years of recording and producing in a makeshift, low-budget project studio, I finally get to build a studio from scratch. And in this video, I'm gonna go over the 6 things that I absolutely will not compromise on and that my new studio must have in place after it's built. Let's dive into it. So my old studio, again, like I mentioned, was just a project studio. A 16 by 16 room, just an AC wall unit in the wall. I was sharing the space with multiple bands on my floor, so it was very noisy. The building wasn't really clean 100%, it's kind of dirty. I did not own the building, I was renting the space. And I decided it was time for an upgrade and I was looking to build an actual studio on my property. And because I'm designing this studio from scratch, I went in there with the intent of building it to where it fits my needs. And that's what I want to talk about in this video, because the 6 things I'm going to share, most people maybe wouldn't think would be at the top of their priority list if they were building a studio. But it's important to me, and maybe it'll help you if you decide to design your own space. All right, so the first feature that my new studio must have is the ability for me to record live tube amps in real time. Now, my old studio, again, was just a 16 by 16 room. So when I would work with guitar players, generally I would record DIs because it was next to impossible to record an amp live at the same time while we were tracking. So what I would generally do is either use amp sims or reamp after the fact. Now, don't get me wrong, amp sims are great. And to be honest with you, they sound just as good as real amps. And this has been the case for a very long time. But to be honest, I'm a guitar player and I absolutely love the process of miking up an amp, finding the perfect placement, finding the right amp that fits the guitar player. And I just like using real amps. I'll always use amp sims. Of course, I will always reamp if the production calls for it. But to have the luxury of just plugging in to a tube amp, miking it up, not having to reamp, keeping things nice and simple and sort of old school, it's been something I've been thinking about for a long time, and I just want to have that available to me while working in my new space. So that's number 1, being able to record amps live and on the spot. Okay, the second thing that my new studio must be able to do is for me to be able to record drums while I'm engineering in a different room. Again, my old studio was a 1-room design, which works great. I actually kind of prefer working in the same room as a drummer. When you're working on a single or even maybe just 2 or 3 songs at a time, it's not bad. You put earplugs in between takes, you take your earplugs out, you unmute your monitors. It's a great workflow. I actually kind of prefer it over being in a pro studio where you're using the TalkBack. I'm not a big fan of using TalkBacks and having to communicate with the drummer through the glass. But truth be told, when you're working on a bigger project, especially when it's like 10 songs over the course of many days, it would be nice to not have to be next to the super loud drum set right behind my head. And that's why with my new studio, I'm designing it to where there will be multiple rooms for me to use. So if I choose to track drums from a different room, I can easily do so. Again, I survived for almost 20 years without this feature when working in my space. But it would be really nice to have it available to me when I don't feel like having drums blasting right behind my skull. So that's number 2. All right, so the third thing I must be able to do in my new studio is to be able to record a band live all at the same time with isolation if need be. So for example, let's say I want to record a band live off the floor, but I want the vocalist to be isolated so that I don't have to worry about cymbal bleed in the vocal mic. I want to be able to do that. Again, in my old space, I couldn't do that. I had 1 room, so the vocal mic was going to be in the same room as the drummer. Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes I actually kind of like the bleed between the drums and the guitars and even the vocals a little. But what happens if I'm recording a vocalist that sings very quietly and I just don't want him or her to be meshed together with the drums? I want to be able to still run sessions live, but I want to be able to isolate maybe the guitars, maybe the bass, maybe the drums, maybe the vocals from each other if need be. This is super important to me, especially as I've been doing more and more live recording throughout the last few years. And traditionally, the only way to really do this is to record out of a bigger studio where they have crazy isolation booths. But I figured out a way around it, which I'm gonna talk more about in this series when you learn more about the building process and what my plans are for the studio, which has just begun construction. So that's number 3, being able to isolate tracks even when recording a band fully live off the floor. All right, number 4, the 4th thing that I must have in my new studio is access to natural light. For almost 20 years of my life, whenever I'd be in the studio working with bands and recording and editing and mixing, I would be in a cave. My old studio did not have windows. And to be fair, a lot of studios don't have windows, but I'm gonna be honest, I kind of hate that. I like seeing the sun, especially when you're putting in those types of hours, those long hours. And it would be nice to have some greenery and look at maybe a little bit, just a touch of nature while working. So my new studio is being designed with access to natural light. It's a little more expensive. Again, I'm gonna cover that later in this video series, but that's something I did not wanna skimp out on. I've had a few designers try to talk me out of it, but no, for me, it's a non-negotiable. I must have access to natural light in my new recording space. Okay, and this leads me to number 5, and that is that my new studio must have high quality HVAC. High quality heating and cooling as well as airflow. My old project studio, all I had access to was baseboard heat that would sometimes not be turned on at all because I couldn't control the heat in the building. And I just had a wall unit for the AC, which actually worked really well. And because I'm recording metal, the noise wasn't really much of an issue, but the air quality was kind of questionable. And believe me, when you have 6 sweaty dudes playing together in a room, having airflow is sort of a necessity. At least at my age, I'm 40 years old now. I don't want to be in a room with 6 sweaty dudes unless there's high quality air being pushed in and taken out. And that is something that my new studio will definitely feature. I worked very hard with my designer on this. So that's number 5, high quality HVAC. Gotta have it. Okay, and number 6, the final thing that my new studio must feature is a welcoming, clean, minimal environment that's vibed out. Now, yes, my old studio, I was able to decorate it the way I wanted to, and I could clean it as much as possible, even though the building was kind of old and deteriorating. But because my new studio will be built from scratch and no one else will be using it except for me, I will have full control over the way that I present my environment to clients. I won't have to worry about, super loud noises coming from next door, or maybe a leaky roof, or light bulbs being out that I can't reach. From here on out, it's all gonna be on me. I plan on outfitting the entire studio with Philips Hue lighting that I could change, it can control. If I wanna take the couch out for a day, I could take the couch out. I know this might seem ridiculous to someone that maybe doesn't work with clients and that doesn't run a production business, but for me, this is extremely important and it's gonna be such a relief to be able to control my environment like this for both me and my clients, as well as the space that I record YouTube videos in for you guys. So that's number 6, being able to create a clean, welcoming, minimalist environment that I can fully control. Now, if you are a gearhead and you love talking about plugins and microphones, you might be pretty disappointed. You may have started watching this video thinking that I was gonna talk about maybe outfitting my new studio with an analog console or buying expensive microphones and a bunch of outboard gear or something like that. And guess what? That is not part of my plan at all. I'm gonna be using the same budget gear that I've always used, just a basic USB interface, the same microphones I've been using for the last 20 years. At the end of the day, it's how you use the tools. And the things that I mentioned in this video are way more important than the gear itself, believe me. I've tracked in really nice studios and I've tracked in my budget project studio as well as in guerrilla style situations where I'm working in the most unideal or not ideal environments imaginable. And the results are always the same because it's the system, the knowledge, and the workflows that matter. So if you're struggling with the results and you're blaming your gear and your plugins and you think that that's the answer, I have news for you. It is not the answer. You just need to be equipped with the right knowledge to achieve the results that you really want. Now, because of this, I'm giving you direct access right now to my free training, 4 dead simple ways to massively improve your recordings and mixes. In this training, you'll learn my #1 technique for prepping heavy guitar tracks that virtually mix themselves. You'll also learn how to create instantaneous clarity within your mixes using any old stock EQ plugin. You'll get to learn how to take control over the levels in your mixes so that instruments stop fighting with one another. And finally, you'll learn how to craft radio-ready vocal mixes using only stock plugins. Now, full disclosure, if you have the attention span of a squirrel, do not bother watching this training. It's almost an hour long, and it's meant for people like me who are serious about audio production. If this is you, if you're serious and you finally want to just produce better results with the gear you're currently using, there's a link below in this video's description, and you could have direct access to the training. So if you found this video interesting and you want to learn more about the build process of my new studio, keep an eye on the channel. I have many more videos in the works where I will document the entire process of this build because there's a lot in store and I think it's fun to share it with you guys. I've been learning a lot myself throughout this process and hopefully you can learn along with me. And until next time, drink that Spindrift.